This is a story about a wedding that made headlines and a honeymoon that never ended. On June 14th, 2019, 847 people attended what was called the wedding of the decade. By June 21st, only one person knew where the bride was, and he wasn't telling anyone. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about one woman's nightmare. It's a warning about what's hiding behind closed doors in America's wealthiest neighborhoods and why no one saw it coming. Before we begin, I need to tell you something important. Every detail in this investigation has been verified through court documents, police reports, and witness testimonies. The names have been changed to protect those involved, but the facts, those are real, and they're more disturbing than you can imagine. Let's start where every story like this starts, with a chance encounter that seemed too good to be true. September 2017, Manhattan, the art gallery opening. Sarah Mitchell, 28, interior designer from Michigan, was in New York for exactly one reason, a conference she almost didn't attend. Marcus Blackwell, 42, real estate developer, net worth estimated at $340 million, was there because he owned the building. According to Sarah's best friend, Jennifer Torres, who we'll hear from throughout this investigation, Sarah wasn't looking for love that night. Jennifer later told investigators, Sarah was actually trying to leave early. She had a headache. Marcus approached her near the exit, and 20 minutes later, she texted me, "Just met someone interesting. Staying a bit longer." That text message would later become evidence, because interesting doesn't begin to describe what Marcus Blackwell really was. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about what Sarah saw in those first few months, because understanding what she believed is crucial to understanding why she didn't see the warning signs. The courtship was, by all accounts, extraordinary. Private jets to Paris, weekend trips to his villa in Tuscany, flowers delivered to her office every Monday morning. Marcus was attentive, charming, generous. But here's where the story takes its first turn. According to 3 separate witnesses, including Sarah's therapist whose testimony would later be unsealed by court order, Marcus had a very specific way of building their relationship. He isolated her gradually, not with force, not with demands, with concern. It started small. Your friends don't seem to understand our connection. That colleague seems jealous of what we have. Your family just doesn't see you the way I do. Dr. Rebecca Chun, domestic psychology expert, analyzed the relationship timeline for prosecutors. She identified what she called the golden cage technique. What makes this pattern so effective is that it feels like love. The isolation is wrapped in protection. The control is disguised as care. By the time the victim realizes what's happened, they're already completely dependent. Sarah's text messages from this period tell the story. October 2017, having dinner with Marcus and my college friends tonight. January 2018, Marcus thinks maybe we should do couple time this weekend. April 2018, didn't see Jen this week. We're just in different places now. August 2018, her last text to Jennifer before the engagement. I know you don't understand, but he makes me feel safe. That word, safe. We're going to come back to that word. Because within a year, Sarah would discover that the safest feeling cage is still a cage. The engagement was announced in February 2019. The wedding was set for June, and that's when people started asking questions. Not publicly, not loudly, but quietly, in concerned phone calls, in worried conversations, because something had changed in Sarah. Her mother, Patricia Mitchell, would later testify, she seemed smaller somehow. Not physically, but like she was taking up less space in her own life. The wedding planning was handled entirely by Marcus's team. Sarah's input? According to the wedding planner's deposition, Sarah would suggest something. Marcus would smile and redirect. Every single time. By the third meeting, she stopped suggesting things. The guest list grew from 200 to 847 people. Sarah knew approximately 90 of them. But here's the detail that investigators would later focus on. Marcus insisted on one specific detail. The honeymoon destination would be a surprise. Not just the resort, not just the country. Sarah wasn't told anything about where they were going. When Jennifer asked about it at the bachelorette party, Sarah laughed it off. He wants it to be romantic. A complete surprise. The surprise was a private estate in rural Montana. 8,000 acres. One main house. No neighbors for miles. And a basement that Sarah didn't know existed until she woke up in it. June 21st, 2019, 11:47 p.m. Jennifer Torres files the first missing person report. The police response, "Ma'am, She's on her honeymoon with her husband. Give them some privacy. This is where the story intersects with something bigger. Something that's happening across the country in wealthy communities, in gated neighborhoods, in places where privacy is code for don't ask questions. Detective Maria Gonzalez, who would eventually lead the investigation, wasn't assigned to the case for another 6 days. 6 days where Sarah was already trapped. But Jennifer didn't stop calling. She filed reports with the NYPD, the FBI, and finally, the Sheriff's Department in Whitefish, Montana, after she spent 3 days tracking down property records to find where Marcus owned land. The Sheriff's Department sent a wellness check on June 27th. Marcus answered the door. He was cordial, cooperative, concerned, even. Sarah's not feeling well. She's been sleeping a lot. Wedding exhaustion. You know how it is. The deputies didn't push. They didn't ask to see her. And that decision would haunt them for years. Because at that exact moment, Sarah was 3 floors below them, in a basement room with soundproofed walls, with a toilet, a sink, a mattress, and a camera. Always a camera. Marcus had told her on day 2, "You're confused. You need time to adjust. This is for your protection. Until you understand." Understand what? That's the question that would drive the entire investigation. Because what Marcus believed, what he genuinely, truly thought he was doing, that's the twist that makes this case unlike any other. July 15th, 2019. Day 24. Sarah's mother receives a text from Sarah's phone. "Hi, Mom. Having an amazing time. So much to tell you. We'll call soon. Love you." Patricia Mitchell knew immediately something was wrong. Not because of what the text said, because of what it didn't say. Sarah never said, "Hi, Mom." She always said, "Hey, Mama." Since childhood, it's the kind of detail that only a mother would catch. The kind of detail that breaks a case wide open. Patricia called Jennifer. Jennifer called her lawyer friend. The lawyer called the FBI. And finally, people started paying attention. Special Agent Thomas Crawford was assigned July 18th. His first call was to Marcus Blackwell. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. Marcus was calm, rational. He explained that Sarah was dealing with some mental health issues. Adjustment disorder, he said. The wedding stress. She needed space. She's been seeing a therapist via video call. Agent Crawford asked to speak with Sarah directly. Marcus said she was sleeping. Crawford said he'd wait. Marcus said that wouldn't be necessary. He'd have Sarah call him the next day. She never called. And that's when the investigation shifted from missing person to criminal. Here's where this story becomes about more than just Sarah. FBI investigators discovered that Marcus Blackwell had been engaged twice before. Both engagements ended abruptly. Both women refused to speak on record. But one of them, Catherine M., as she's identified in court documents, agreed to speak with investigators privately. Her testimony changed everything. Catherine had dated Marcus for 2 years in the early 2000s. She described the same pattern: intense romance, gradual isolation, growing control, but she broke it off before the wedding. When asked why, she said something that sent chills through the investigation team. "He told me once that marriage was about ownership, not legally, spiritually. He said when 2 people marry, they become one person, and someone has to be the decision maker." Investigators started pulling thread after thread. Marcus's childhood, his parents' relationship, his father's business practices. What they found was a man who genuinely believed he was protecting Sarah. From what? From herself, from the world, from making wrong choices. In his mind, the basement wasn't a prison. It was a reset, a place where Sarah could remember who she really was without outside influence. Dr. Robert Hayes, forensic psychiatrist, reviewed the case files. This is a delusional control pattern rooted in extreme possessiveness. The subject believes their actions are loving, protective. That makes them incredibly dangerous because they don't see themselves as the villain. August 3rd, 2019. Day 50. The FBI had enough for a warrant. But they had a problem. The Montana estate was massive. Multiple buildings. Underground sections that weren't in the original blueprints. If they raided and didn't find Sarah immediately, Marcus could panic, could move her, could make things worse. So they made a choice that would later be heavily debated. They sent someone in undercover. Not a federal agent, a building inspector. Marcus had recently applied for permits to expand the estate's electrical system. The inspector, actually Agent Lisa Mendez, arrived August 8th. She had one job: locate Sarah without tipping off Marcus. What happened next has never been fully disclosed to the public. Until now. Agent Mendez spent 4 hours inspecting the property. Marcus was cooperative, gave her full access to every room, except one hallway in the basement. That section is off limits, he said. Personal storage. Mendez said she needed to check all electrical systems. Marcus hesitated. Then he said something that made Mendez's blood run cold. My wife doesn't like people going through her things, even when she's resting. Resting. Present tense. Mendez made a decision in that moment. She dropped her inspection tablet near the hallway. When she bent to pick it up, she pressed her ear to the door, and she heard it. Faint, barely audible, breathing, and then crying. August 11th, 2019, 4:47 a.m. Tactical teams surrounded the Montana estate. The plan was precision, speed, safety. But plans don't always account for human psychology, especially when the subject believes they're in the right. At 4:52 a.m., agents breached 3 entry points simultaneously. Marcus was in the kitchen, making breakfast. 2 plates. When agents entered, he didn't run, didn't fight. He looked confused. According to Agent Crawford's report, Marcus's first words were, "Why are you here? Is something wrong?" 3 agents moved to the basement. They found the door. Reinforced steel. Keypad lock. They called for Marcus to provide the code. He refused. Not violently. Calmly. "You don't understand what you're doing. She's finally getting better. You'll ruin everything." They breached the door with hydraulic tools. 6 minutes later, they found Sarah. What they saw in that room, the investigators who were there still struggled to talk about it. Not because of violence. Because of what Sarah said when they opened the door. She looked at the agents, then past them, to where Marcus was being restrained upstairs. And she whispered, "Please don't hurt him. He's just trying to help me." That moment, that reaction, that's what makes this case so disturbing. And that's what makes it a warning about something much bigger than one man's delusion. But we'll get to that. First, we need to understand what those 53 days were like, and what Sarah had to do to survive them. The basement room was approximately 12 by 15 feet. One small window near the ceiling, painted over. A single overhead light on a timer. 8 hours of light. 16 hours of darkness. Sarah's testimony, given 6 months after her rescue, provides the most detailed account we have of what happened in that room. She spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word had to be evaluated before it could be released. Day 1, she said, "I woke up and I didn't know where I was. The last thing I remembered was being on the plane. Marcus had given me champagne. He said we should toast to our new life. I drank it. Then nothing. When I woke up, I was in that room. There was a note on the pillow next to me. The note, entered as evidence in the trial, read, 'My darling Sarah, I know you're confused right now. I know you're probably scared. But I need you to trust me. The world out there tried to change you. Your friends. Your family. They didn't see the real you. The woman I fell in love with. This time is for us. For you to remember who you are without all the noise. I'll bring you meals. We'll talk every day. And soon, you'll understand. This is love. Real love. All my heart, Marcus.'" Sarah continued her testimony. "He came down that first day around noon. He brought soup and bread. He sat on the floor outside the door. The door had a slot at the bottom for food, and he talked to me. He told me this was temporary, that he just needed me to reset. Those were his words. Reset. Like I was a computer that had been programmed wrong. I screamed at him. I begged. I threatened. He just kept saying, 'I know you're angry.' That's the confusion talking. We'll work through it." Dr. Amanda Foster, trauma specialist who worked with Sarah during her recovery, explained the psychological warfare Sarah was subjected to. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic psychological conditioning. Marcus had created an environment where he controlled every single aspect of Sarah's existence. When she ate, when the lights were on, when she had human contact. And he used that control to try to reshape her perception of reality. He would tell her that her family had stopped looking for her, that her friends had moved on, that the outside world didn't care. Then he would position himself as the only person who truly loved her, the only constant in her universe. The daily routine was always the same. 6 a.m., lights on, breakfast through the slot. 7 a.m., Marcus would come down for what he called their morning session. He would sit outside the door and talk to her about their future, the children they would have, the life they would build. How grateful she would be once she understood. Sarah learned quickly that resistance made things worse. If she yelled, the lights would go out early. If she refused to eat, meals would be skipped the next day. If she didn't respond during the morning sessions, he would stay down there for hours, talking at her until she finally acknowledged him. So she adapted. She started responding, started eating, started pretending, because Sarah understood something crucial in those first few days. If she was going to survive, if she was going to escape, she needed Marcus to believe his plan was working. Jennifer's testimony about Sarah's personality became important context here. She said, Sarah was always strategic. In college, when we had a professor who was unfair, Sarah didn't fight directly. She documented everything, built a case, went through proper channels. She was patient, calculating in the best way. When I heard what she did in that basement, I wasn't surprised. That was Sarah, finding a way to win even when she had no power. Sarah began keeping a journal. Not on paper. She didn't have paper. She used her fingernail to scratch words into the painted concrete wall behind the toilet where the camera couldn't see. Day numbers. Key phrases, Marcus said. Her own thoughts to keep herself sane. Investigators found those scratches when they processed the scene. Over 200 individual entries. Some were simple. Day 12. Still here. Some were more complex. Day 23. He thinks I'm changing. Good. Let him think that. Let him believe. One day he'll make a mistake. The mistake came on day 31. Marcus brought her a book, a novel she had mentioned loving in one of their early dates. He slid it through the slot with dinner. He said, I thought you might want something to read. To help pass the time. You've been so good lately. So cooperative. I'm proud of you. That book represented a shift. Marcus was rewarding what he perceived as progress. He was beginning to trust that his reset was working. Sarah played into it. When he came for the morning session the next day, she thanked him for the book. She said, I've been thinking about what you said, about how I let other people influence me. Maybe you're right. Maybe I did lose myself. According to the audio recordings Marcus had been keeping, his response was immediate and emotional. He started crying. He said, I knew you'd understand. I knew the real you was still in there. This is why I did this, Sarah. Because I love you too much to let you disappear. The recordings, over 50 hours of audio, were found on Marcus's laptop. He had been documenting everything. In his mind, he was creating a record of Sarah's transformation, evidence of his success. In reality, he was creating the evidence that would convict him. Sarah's strategy intensified after that. She started asking him questions during the sessions. About his childhood. About his parents. About what love meant to him. She wasn't just passing time. She was building a psychological profile. Understanding her captor. Looking for weaknesses. Marcus's father, she learned, had been controlling. Domineering. His mother had been submissive. Quiet. In Marcus's mind, that was what love looked like. Strength and surrender. Protection and gratitude. His father had told him, according to one of the recordings, that a man's job was to make decisions for his family, to shield them from bad choices. Marcus wasn't rebelling against his upbringing. He was recreating it. By day 40, Marcus had started leaving the door unlocked during some of the morning sessions. He would sit inside the room with her. They would talk. He brought her better food, a pillow, a blanket, small comforts that felt enormous in that environment. Sarah never tried to run during these moments. She knew the main house was locked. The property was massive. She had no phone, no way to call for help. Running would accomplish nothing except proving to Marcus that she hadn't really changed. So she waited. She performed. She became the woman Marcus wanted to see. On day 47, Marcus said something that made Sarah's blood run cold even as she smiled and nodded. He said, I think we're almost ready. Another week, maybe 2, and we can start our real honeymoon. We'll travel. I'll show you the world the right way. Without all the distractions. Just us. Sarah understood what that meant. If Marcus moved her, if they left Montana, the chances of rescue dropped dramatically. She was running out of time. That night, she made a decision. The next morning, during their session, she told Marcus she wanted to see the sun. Real sunlight. Just for a few minutes. He hesitated. She pressed. She said, You've helped me so much. I feel like myself again. I just want to feel the sun on my face. To feel alive in our new beginning. Marcus agreed. He said they would go outside the next day. Just to the back patio. Just for 10 minutes. Sarah had no plan beyond that moment. No strategy for what she would do when she got outside. She just knew she needed to change the pattern. To create an opportunity. To do something. But she never got the chance. Because the next morning, at 4:47 a.m., she heard sounds she didn't recognize. Shouting. Footsteps. And then, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Someone shouting, FBI? We're here to help you. When the agents breached the door and found Sarah, she was sitting on the mattress, fully dressed, waiting. She had heard them coming, and she knew what it meant. But she also knew Marcus was somewhere in the house. And she had spent 53 days learning how to manage his psychology, learning what to say to keep him calm. So when she said, "Please don't hurt him. He's just trying to help me," she wasn't defending him. She was protecting the agents. Because she knew if Marcus felt attacked, if he felt cornered, he might do something desperate. Even then, after everything, Sarah was still strategizing, still surviving. The paramedics who treated Sarah at the scene reported that she was physically stable, dehydrated, vitamin D deficient, minor injuries consistent with extended confinement, but alive, functional, alert. The psychological damage was less visible but far more profound. Dr. Foster explained. Sarah spent nearly 2 months in captivity with her abuser. But the captivity started long before the basement. It started the moment Marcus began isolating her from her support system. By the time she woke up in that room, she had already been psychologically imprisoned for over a year. Marcus was arrested at the scene without incident. He repeatedly asked if Sarah was okay, if she was upset, if she understood why he had to do this. Agent Crawford's report noted that Marcus showed no signs of guilt or remorse, only confusion that his plan had been interrupted. During the initial interrogation, Marcus's statements were chilling in their sincerity. He said, "I don't understand why everyone is so upset. I was protecting her. I was helping her become the woman she was meant to be. Don't you see? She was grateful. She told me she understood. We were almost finished." When investigators asked what he meant by finished, Marcus explained his full plan. He had intended to keep Sarah in the basement for exactly 90 days. 3 months. A full reset cycle, he called it. After that, he planned to take her traveling, to reintroduce her to the world under his guidance. He had already booked trips, hotels, excursions. He showed investigators the itinerary on his phone. Sarah had been 1 week away from Phase 2. The evidence against Marcus was overwhelming. The recordings, the journal scratches, the testimony from Sarah, from Jennifer, from the previous fiancé, the FBI's documentation of the property, the timeline of events. But Marcus's defense attorney argued something unexpected. He didn't claim innocence. He claimed delusion. The defense strategy was unprecedented. They argued that Marcus genuinely believed he was acting out of love, that his perception of reality had been so warped by his upbringing and his psychological condition that he couldn't distinguish between protection and imprisonment, between love and control. They brought in psychiatrists who diagnosed Marcus with delusional disorder and obsessive love syndrome. They argued for treatment, not punishment. The prosecution's response was delivered by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Kim. Her closing argument is still studied in law schools today. She said, "The defendant wants you to believe that his delusion excuses his actions, that because he believed he was helping Sarah Mitchell, we should show him mercy. But let me ask you this. Does a kidnapper's motivation change the trauma of the victim? Does a captor's belief in their own righteousness give them the right to steal someone's freedom?" Marcus Blackwell kept a woman in a basement for 53 days. He controlled when she ate, when she saw light, when she had human contact. He broke her psychologically to the point where she felt she had to perform for him to survive. He didn't do this out of love. He did this out of ownership. And ownership of another human being has a name. It's called slavery. And in this country, we decided a long time ago that no belief, no delusion, no claimed love justifies that. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Marcus Blackwell guilty on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault. The judge sentenced him to 35 years without the possibility of parole for 20 years. At the sentencing hearing, Sarah gave her victim impact statement. This is a partial transcript. She said, "People keep asking me how I survived, how I stayed sane, how I managed to keep fighting. The truth is, I almost didn't. There were days when I thought it would be easier to believe him, to accept what he was saying, to let myself disappear into the person he wanted me to be. That's what he was counting on. That's what makes what he did so evil. Not the physical captivity, the psychological annihilation. He tried to erase me, and he almost succeeded." She continued, "Marcus Blackwell will tell you he loved me. He'll tell you he was trying to help me. But love doesn't lock you in a basement. Love doesn't take away your choices, your voice, your humanity. What Marcus did wasn't love. It was consumption. He wanted to consume my identity and replace it with his version of who I should be. And the scariest part? He's not alone. There are people in this country, in every country, who believe that love gives them the right to control another person, who believe that marriage is ownership, who believe that their partner's autonomy is negotiable. This case isn't just about me and Marcus. It's about a culture that sometimes still confuses control with care, possession with protection. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Marcus, for the first time since his arrest, showed emotion. He was crying, but according to observers, they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of loss. He had lost his possession, his project, the woman he had tried to rebuild. Sarah walked out of that courtroom and into a life she had to reconstruct from scratch. The aftermath of this case rippled far beyond one courtroom in Montana. Sarah's case became a catalyst for national conversations about coercive control, psychological abuse, and the ways wealth and power can hide crimes in plain sight. 3 states introduced new legislation specifically addressing psychological imprisonment and coercive control in domestic relationships. Law enforcement agencies across the country revised their protocols for wellness checks and missing person cases involving newlyweds or isolated individuals. The sheriff's deputies who had knocked on Marcus's door and accepted his explanation without seeing Sarah became the subject of an internal investigation. They were suspended without pay for 30 days. The department implemented mandatory training on recognizing signs of coercive control and established a policy requiring visual confirmation of welfare in all wellness check scenarios. Jennifer Torres became an advocate for missing persons and domestic abuse awareness. She speaks publicly about the red flags she missed, the systems that failed Sarah, and the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. In an interview 6 months after the trial, Jennifer said, "I keep thinking about all the times I brushed off my concerns. When Sarah stopped calling as much, when she seemed smaller around Marcus, I told myself I was being overprotective, that I should be happy for her. That love looks different for everyone. And maybe all of that is true. But it's also true that abuse looks like love sometimes. And we have to be willing to ask hard questions even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable." Sarah herself has remained largely out of the public eye. She declined multiple offers for interviews, book deals, and documentary features. Through her attorney, she released one statement approximately 1 year after her rescue. It read, in part, "I am healing. That's the word I use because recovery suggests going back to who I was before, and I can't do that. That person no longer exists. Marcus didn't just take 53 days from me. He took the version of myself that could trust easily, that could love without fear, that could walk into a room without calculating exits. I'm building a new version of myself now. Someone who survived. Someone who fought. Someone who refuses to be defined by what was done to her. It's slow work. Some days are harder than others. But I'm still here. And that matters." The question that haunted investigators, psychologists, and the public was this: how many others are out there? How many people are trapped in basements, in homes, in relationships that look perfect from the outside but are prisons on the inside? Dr. Foster, who worked with Sarah, addressed this in a research paper published 2 years after the case concluded. She wrote, "The Mitchell-Blackwell case exposed something uncomfortable about modern society. We have become very good at recognizing physical violence. We know what bruises look like. We know the signs of assault. But we are still learning to recognize psychological captivity, the isolation that happens gradually, the control that's disguised as concern, the ownership that's called love. And when that captivity occurs within wealthy communities, behind gated properties, in marriages that look enviable from the outside, we're even less likely to see it. We make assumptions. We think, surely someone with resources, with education, with options, couldn't be trapped. But wealth doesn't prevent abuse. Sometimes it just hides it better. Statistics from the National Domestic Violence Hotline show that reports of psychological abuse and coercive control increased by 43% in the 2 years following Sarah's case. Whether that's because more abuse is happening or because more victims felt empowered to name what was happening to them is unclear. Probably both. What is clear is that Sarah's story opened a door to a conversation that desperately needed to happen. Marcus Blackwell is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility. He has given one interview from prison to a criminal psychology researcher studying delusional disorders. In that interview, Marcus maintained that he had been trying to help Sarah, that his methods may have been wrong, but his intentions were pure. He expressed regret not for keeping her in the basement, but for not explaining his plan better, for not helping her understand before she got scared. The researcher noted that Marcus showed no insight into the harm he had caused, no understanding that his love was actually control. His protection was actually imprisonment. That disconnect, that inability to see himself as the villain of the story, is what makes cases like this so disturbing and so dangerous. There are others like Marcus, people who genuinely believe their control is care. Their restrictions are protection. Their ownership is devotion. They're not hiding in dark alleys. They're in boardrooms and country clubs. They're charming at dinner parties. They're respected in their communities. And they're destroying the people they claim to love. Sarah's case became a warning, a reminder that danger doesn't always look dangerous, that abuse doesn't always announce itself, that sometimes the most terrifying prison is one where the door looks like love. In the years since her rescue, Sarah has slowly begun rebuilding relationships with her family and friends. She moved to a different state, changed her name legally, and started a new career. She attends therapy twice a week. She's joined a support group for survivors of long-term captivity and psychological abuse. She's learning to trust again, to make decisions without second-guessing herself, to take up space without apologizing. Her mother, Patricia, said in a rare interview, "My daughter is the strongest person I know, not because of what she endured, but because of what she's choosing to do with her survival." She could have disappeared into bitterness or fear. Instead, she's fighting to build a life worth saving. That's courage, the real kind, the kind that shows up every single day, even when it's hard. Jennifer and Sarah have reconnected, though their friendship looks different now. Jennifer described it this way: "There's a before and an after. We both know it. We don't talk about it constantly, but it's there. I think I carry guilt that I probably shouldn't, and she carries trauma that she definitely shouldn't. We're both trying to figure out what our relationship looks like now. But we're trying, and that matters." One detail that emerged in the years after the trial adds another layer to this already complex case. Investigators discovered that Marcus had been seeing a therapist for 5 years before he met Sarah. The therapist, Dr. Alan Morrison, was brought in for questioning about whether he had seen warning signs of Marcus's potential for violence. Dr. Morrison maintained patient confidentiality initially, but eventually provided limited information under court order. He acknowledged that Marcus had expressed views about relationships and control that concerned him, but nothing that rose to the level of mandatory reporting. Nothing that suggested imminent danger. Dr. Morrison's notes from sessions with Marcus reveal a man struggling with intense fear of abandonment, pathological need for control, and a deeply distorted view of love and partnership. In one session note from 2016, Dr. Morrison wrote, "Client continues to express belief that true love requires total devotion and surrender from partner. When challenged on whether this allows for autonomy, client becomes defensive, states that autonomy in relationships is an illusion that leads to betrayal." Exploring childhood origins of these beliefs. The question that haunted Dr. Morrison and many others in the mental health community was whether this tragedy could have been prevented, if there had been better communication between mental health professionals and law enforcement, if there had been clearer guidelines on when concerning beliefs cross into dangerous ideology, if Marcus had been more honest in therapy, or if he had been pushed harder to confront his delusions. These questions don't have clean answers. They never do. What happened to Sarah exists in the space between what we could have known and what we failed to act on, between red flags we saw but didn't recognize and systems that weren't designed to catch someone like Marcus Blackwell. Since Sarah's case, there has been increased focus on understanding coercive control as a crime distinct from physical domestic violence. Several countries, including the UK and Ireland, have made coercive control a specific criminal offense. In the United States, the movement has been slower, but states are beginning to adopt legislation that recognizes psychological abuse and control as actionable offenses even in the absence of physical violence. Sarah's testimony before a congressional committee examining domestic violence legislation was pivotal in pushing some of these changes forward. Though she appeared via video and used only her first name, her words carried weight. She told the committee, "When people think of domestic violence, they think of bruises, of broken bones, of visible harm. But some of the worst abuse leaves no marks you can photograph. It erases you from the inside. It makes you doubt your own reality. It isolates you so completely that even when you're surrounded by people, you're alone. And our laws, in many places, still don't recognize that as violence. We need to change that. We need to acknowledge that you can be imprisoned without chains, that you can be assaulted without being touched, that violence against your autonomy, your identity, your humanity is still violence. The legacy of this case continues to evolve. Sarah's story has been referenced in over 200 legal cases involving domestic abuse, coercive control, and psychological imprisonment. It's taught in law schools, psychology programs, and law enforcement training academies. It's become a touchstone for a broader cultural reckoning with how we understand power, control, and abuse in intimate relationships. But beyond the statistics and the policy changes and the academic discussions, there's a simpler truth at the heart of this story. A woman was taken. A woman fought. A woman survived. And a woman is rebuilding. Sarah Mitchell's story is about captivity, yes, but it's also about resistance, about the quiet, determined ways people fight back even when they have no power, about the strength it takes not just to survive trauma, but to refuse to let trauma define you. In a society that often expects victims to be perfect, to have fought back in obvious ways, to show their trauma in recognizable forms, Sarah's story challenges those expectations. She survived by adapting, by performing, by becoming, temporarily, what her captor needed her to be. And then, when she was free, by choosing not to remain that person. That kind of survival is messy. It's complicated. It doesn't fit neatly into narratives about heroism or victimhood. It's just human. Deeply, painfully, powerfully human. The final image from this case that stays with many people is from the day of Marcus's sentencing. Sarah sat in the front row of the courtroom. She didn't look at Marcus when he was brought in. She didn't react when he turned to look at her. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed. And when the judge read the sentence, 35 years, Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment. Not in relief, not in victory, just in acknowledgement. This chapter was ending. The next one, the one where she decided who she would become, was beginning.